Welcome back. We're in the middle of Future Politics panel with Oscar Gill-Lewis, who's a writer and political commentator, and Frieza Balgin-Gouveia. Almost. Good morning.
Good morning.
Right, let's move on to this, which is really fascinating. I was sent this by Wolves of Westminster, and thank you for that. The British Polling Council has recently drawn a direct comparison between Reform UK and the National Rally in France. They have essentially declared Reform UK as being far right. This distinction has been drawn by Delta Poll. It was made at an event on the 15th of January. They hosted all sorts of other pollsters there as well. The British Polling Council represents 33 major polling organisations in the UK. The segment in question was called The Rise of the Far Right. So Delta Poll, Ipsos, YouGov, Opinion, Survation, Sky Data, all there and so on. So essentially they said, right, we need to look at what Reform UK is doing and compare it to the National Front, and that is because Reform UK is a far-right party. What is a far-right party, and is Reform UK far-right?
It's not really clear what far-right means. I think it's just a name that people use when they don't like something, that, you know, Reform are a bit cheeky and they say, oh, that's far-right, and it's just a way for people to ignore them. It's not clear what...
I think far-right politics is normally called extremism, xenophobia, homophobia, all those kind of things. Those are far-right policies. Do you think that encompasses Reform UK?
I don't think it does. I think far-right would be something more like the BNP, and, you know, thank God that that party is gone. But Reform is just... Reform is more of a Thatcherite, centre-right party from my perspective. It's not really clear that they're far-right in any of their policies.
That's interesting. Frieza?
I don't agree. I don't think Reform UK is far right. I think they're very right wing, and
are
you
they?
know,
Why do you say that?
wing.
No, I want you to tell me why are they far right?
They're not far right.
Oh, they're not?
No, they're
Okay.
just very right wing. But
Right, why are they very right wing?
Because I think they're more right wing than the Tory government. Because
Give me an example.
Well, just anything really. I mean, they just love this country. They're very nationalistic, very patriotic.
Okay, yeah, that's good. I agree with that.
And I think they're very traditional. When it comes to like the 21st century, and especially now, this day and age, when you talk about traditional values and such, it may come across as very, very far right wing for like very far left people.
Why is it far right to believe in family and the country? Is it?
It's not that. I just think that that's the main difference right now. You either are on one spectrum of politics or on the other.
No, I understand.
What about all the people in the middle? I think that they find themselves just lost right now.
So Oscar said something very interesting, that Reform is occupying the Thatcherite territory. I agree with you, actually. Yeah. I think it's absolutely on the money. These are fiscally conservative. They're also socially conservative, but actually and the thing that really annoys me is when people level accusations of xenophobia or racism or homophobia at Reform UK. All of that is utter nonsense, because Reform UK has candidates of all sorts of nationalities, different colours, also different sexualities, and that none of that matters. What matters is actually being passionate about this country and delivering for the country.
Absolutely. It's just not useful to the conversation, just calling people far right or xenophobic or racist. It's just name calling. It's not constructive criticism of their policies, why their policies are wrong, or why they're incorrect, or how we could do better. One thing I would disagree with is saying that they're far right in comparison to the Conservative Party. The Conservative Party doesn't have an ideology. It's definitely not centre right. It's a wet towel as far as I can see.
It's a brilliant point. Would you agree?
Yeah, I mean, Reform has overtook Tories by membership numbers, and I think that shows a lot. But also, just adding on to that point where people think that, you know, Reform is far right, I think it's a lot to do with media and media influence and the fear of the unknown. Whether you like it or not, a new party is always going to cause some anxiety into people, because they don't necessarily know, you know, what are the policies. They don't really have the history of what was happening throughout the years. So I think people, because they're anxious and they're kind of like scared for the future and what this party represents, they tend to put a label on something so that it can make it easier to understand for themselves.
Okay, I mean, obviously I have a vested interest and I've been there right from the very beginning. Let me just show you the poll, if we've got the poll of the latest voting intention. This week, every single poll, this is 7 out of them, has shown Reform pulling ahead. This poll is Find Out Now, Reform UK on 27, Labour on 23. Conservatives And many of my friends believe the Conservatives have a natural divine right to rule. We're clearly not doing very well. Kemi Badenoch has no policies whatsoever. Reform UK really in its ascendancy. If I was to say to Richard Tice and Nigel Farage, as we did at the time some years ago when we were polling at 2 or 3%, that we'd be on 7%, no one would have believed it. What do you think is going on, Oscar? I'll tell you one other thing that I just want to get from you. The number of young people joining Reform is off the scale.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting that they're trying to offer an alternative to the Conservative Party, and especially being that they're really the only two...
Is it to the Conservative Party, though? Because actually there are more ex-Labour members joining currently than Tories.
That's interesting. I'd not consider that, but just in terms of an actual party rather than the members, I'm not sure why Labour members would join Reform. I'm not sure what Reform really offers those members unless they're so disenfranchised by Keir Starmer and Rachel Reeves.
I mean, if you are tribally left and you have worked very hard and you maybe own your own property, you've got kids and you're finding the economy struggling, wouldn't you welcome lower tax to actually have respect back in this country, to stop illegal migration, all the stuff that Reform stands for?
So you're probably right there, that the people from the left joining Reform are probably older people with kids who are married, who have a house, who are fed up with establishment politics like Labour, like the Conservative Party. And then the younger people joining Reform are probably more conservative, more right-wing, and who would rather see the end of the Conservative Party.
Interesting. We'll continue this after the break. Stay where you are. This is Weekend Breakfast.